First of all, I ask you, could I just protest in the strongest possible manner that I can at the way the Taoiseach's questions are being handled. I mean, there are 34 questions here. I have 18 of them, and they're not all related. And I think what is happening here, by putting the 34 together, it's just a far, far too clever attempt to bury, sorry, let me finish, if I may, to bury some of the questions. I can't, no, because you've now bundled them together, Taoiseach. And this has been a tactic of yours from the beginning. You said you were going to desist from that, and for a while you did, and you come in here today and you throw. Sorry, Taoiseach, I have the floor now, Taoiseach. You spoke, okay? You gave your answer. I'm now asking questions based on the answer that you gave. And in answering, the point is very relevant to what I'm about to say to you. The very first question I asked was about dissident activity in Northern Ireland and the impact on G8. So I asked you question number 5 to ask the Taoiseach the way he commemorated the 15th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, if we make a statement on the matter. You didn't answer that question. And of course you didn't because you wanted to bury it, but I'll come back to that in a moment. I asked you 3 questions then that have absolutely nothing to do with Northern Ireland. To ask the Taoiseach if there's been any update from the British government, to ask the Taoiseach if he discussed bankers' bonuses at his meeting with Prime Minister Cameron. 10, to ask the Taoiseach if he discussed England's membership of the European Union and the forthcoming referendum in 2016 at his meeting with Prime Minister Cameron. But these are separate, distinct items, Taoiseach, not related to Northern Ireland, that demand a distinct reply and separate answer and follow-up in separate chunks in here. Number 11, to ask if you discussed the European response to the financial crisis with Prime Minister Cameron. And again, that was buried in the overall reply. And there's the bilateral loan, which you said you didn't discuss with him, and a whole range of other issues that are not related to just Northern Ireland itself. And so, Taoiseach, I think it's unacceptable. I mean, what you did initially when you came in here, you reduced by 1 day the number of days we could have Taoiseach's questions, because we had them on a Tuesday and a Wednesday in previous Dáil and Oireachtas settings. And what's going on here, Taoiseach, is reducing accountability to the House for issues that come under your responsibility. That's what has been happening successfully here. In terms of the questions that I have put, the issue of the commemoration of the 15th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, Taoiseach, I think it is disappointing that you and your government choose not to mark the anniversary of what, by any yardstick, was a hugely important event. And your failure to mark it in any meaningful way, I think, points to 2 emerging themes from this government. And I think the first is an alarming disengagement from what is happening in the North. And I've spoken about this at some length over the course of the last year, and it's my belief that a belief and an attitude has taken root within the Irish and the British governments that, quote, the North is sorted and should be allowed to get on with things on its own. And I think that's a fundamental mistake. And I think the increasingly fractious relationship between the DUP and Sinn Féin is causing a dangerous vacuum, which all of us should be concerned about. I think, Taoiseach, it's important for those of us in political leadership to have the generosity of spirit to acknowledge that we have a shared non-partisan history. And I think, Taoiseach, your failure to mark the Good Friday Agreement, in my view, springs from, in many ways, from an attitude and an approach to government which is very, very partisan. I think your leadership is a partisan kind, and I've raised this with you in the context of your speech last year at Bale Namlaw, and I raise it again because I do think there are occasions when you should step outside your partisan base and acknowledge seminal events and very groundbreaking events in our history and do it properly. And also, very often, marking 15 years of the Good Friday Agreement could be a launching pad and create energy for the next iteration, the next phase, and the next evolution of politics on the island and the relationship between Britain and Ireland. Because there are issues there that need to be addressed and need to be attended to. Because there is a degree of stasis within the politics, in my view, within the North, and particularly on the executive. I think there's been a lack of legislation within the Assembly, and I believe the government and the executive in the North has not been working effectively or as optimally as it could. I want to ask you, Taoiseach, did you talk to Prime Minister Cameron about extending the remit of the Parades Commission? Parading continues to remain a major risk to civic stability in the North. There's a lot of nervousness in the North about the upcoming parading season. particularly because of the flags violence that we witnessed last Christmas. And that was particularly harmful, particularly for some communities like the Short Strand enclave in East Belfast. They now, Taoiseach, have been effectively enduring a continuous parading season because of the fallout of the flags dispute. I think it's vitally important, Taoiseach, that the authority of the Parades Commission be underpinned by both the Irish and the British governments, and that hasn't been happening to the degree that it should have, particularly since Christmas onwards. At the Hillsborough talks over 2 years ago now, it was agreed that a process was to have started, which was seen the various strands of opinion agree on an alternative structure. But no obvious progress has been achieved on that by the parties. So the Parades Commission can only continue in its vitally important work in the absence of any alternative if it's clear to all that it has the Irish government's support and indeed is not going to be second-guessed, not going to be undermined by any strand of political opinion because someone doesn't like the determination it makes. Now, Taoiseach, the performance of First Minister Peter Robinson last summer when he co-signed an open letter condemning the organisation was, I think, a major setback, exactly the opposite of what the families in Northern Ireland have a right to expect from their leaders. Were you aware of this, Taoiseach? Have you a view on the fact that he co-signed a letter which fundamentally undermined the one authority that is designed to call it in terms of parades? And I think these are issues that demand to be discussed and raised with the British government and sorted out. We have other issues in terms of policing and the PSNI, and I support the PSNI, but other groupings, I saw Sinn Féin picketing a PSNI office because they didn't like who the PSNI arrested. I don't think you are, actually. I don't think you are. I do not think you are. I think if you're in the executive, if you're in the government, it undermines, and if you're on the policing boards, it undermines the authority of the PSNI if you start questioning their operational decisions in who they arrest in pursuit of various crimes. That is just fundamentally wrong. And you do not enjoy that luxury. I don't think parties who are in government enjoy that right, actually. And I think, no, the point is you can't have it each way, every way, all of the time. And I think, of course, they're accountable through created structures under the patent reforms. That's why people are on the policing boards. There is accountability to the boards. The various communities have representation. Political parties have representation. Sinn Féin have representation in the policing boards. And various communities have. And that there is a line of accountability. And unfortunately, there's a very grave danger that policing can once again be compromised in the north because of this activity. Just as parading commissions, and indeed in loyalist areas where, when arrests happen, there's a pattern has occurred. If arrests happen in loyalist communities, there are protests. People can switch on riots if they don't like who's being arrested. Now, we can't condemn that kind of activity on the one hand, or people can condemn that on one hand, and on the other hand decide we can pick it if we don't like who's being but it creates increased tensions, and it inflames opinion, and it undermines the authority of the PSNI, which, in my view, and no institution is perfect, but has represented probably one of the better transformative breakthroughs and new departures that emanated from the Good Friday Agreement. And Patton and the work he did, and the work that everybody did, actually has been held up as a model in terms of how policing should be done in conflict areas across the globe. We should do nothing, and we should be extremely careful, and all parties should be extremely careful, that nothing is done to undermine that breakthrough. Certainly enhance it by all means, but let's not play to all bases all of the time. And the problem in northern politics, as far as I can see it, the main parties play to the electoral base to the detriment of the common good on social, economic and political issues. So, Taoiseach, I'm conscious that I would ask you, sorry?
Please, through the chair, please.
If you blush a good bit if you listen to the truth and the facts.
Please, through the chair.
I'm reliably informed that on prime time there were certain people blushing, quite significantly, but it could, I doubt it somehow.
Well, come on.
I doubt it somehow. But
we're on Taoiseach's questions now.
Taoiseach, in terms of your discussions with Prime Minister Cameron, can you expand upon the discussions in relation to the independent inquiry into the murder of Pat Finucane? What is the British government's response to you on that? And, you know, again, are you genuinely pushing this? Have you come up with any creative approach to break the logjam and to move to implement what is, again, and this comes back to the point about marking the Good Friday Agreement and subsequent agreements that flowed from it, to internationally binding agreements between the two governments. It undermines the authority of those agreements, and it undermines confidence in the relationship between both governments when aspects of those agreements are not followed through and are not developed. And there may be a desire on the British government's behalf to leave well alone because of the fear of what it might open up in terms of collusion with loyalist gangs and others at the time. But in my view, the truth must come out, and transparency is required in terms of a better future.
Thank you, Deputy. And Taoiseach.
Well, that's a good dissertation for 15 minutes anyway. Thank you. Yeah, I don't have a problem at all. I'll answer any individual questions you want. First of all, you're wrong when you say that the occasion of the 15th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement being signed was not marked. There was a special hearing of the joint committee here, called by Deputy McHugh, which had a presentation from the Chief Executive of Cooperation Ireland, from a former PSNI officer, and two other contributions. It would have been all too easy to issue a statement and just leave it like that. But the Deputy did call a special meeting to mark that significant event, which everybody here supports. The issues that I discussed with...
No, but Deputy.
No, the last time when I tried to intervene, you said that you were in possession. So if you just listen for a minute now, I'll answer your questions. I've taken careful note of them. The issues that we discussed in Downing Street with Prime Minister Cameron, progress in developing and implementing the programme of work within the framework of last year's joint statement, bilateral relations and economic relations, recommendations from the Joint Economic Study interim report and what that leads on to, political developments and the security situation in Northern Ireland, commemoration of significant centenary starting with the First World War, the G8 summit in June in Fermanagh, and the opportunity to showcase Northern Ireland in a very positive light, the EU presidency and the outcome of the discussions to that point at the MFF, the CRD4 directive, the using the roles of the EU presidency and the G8 to press for the launch of the mandate in respect of the EU-US trade agreements, and the European arrest warrant, which I pointed out the impracticality of suggestions of pulling out of this and trying to go back into particular sectors of it. Now, you mentioned in regard to Pat Finucane, I've always said in relation to questions from yourself and from Deputy Adams and others, that the government here followed through on an all-party motion that we've had quite a number of years ago, indeed in my own name, that there would be an independent public inquiry here. I've made that case very clearly to the British Prime Minister. Obviously, the British government have a different view than us on this, and we have differed publicly on this on a number of occasions. I contacted the Finucane family directly after the De Silva report. They made it clear that they were not happy about this. They made it clear that they wished to pursue the opportunity to have a full-scale public inquiry. I support that. I spoke to Geraldine Finucane in Washington. I reiterated that, and officials from my department remain in contact with the Finucane family. I made it clear that the Irish government will continue to seek at every opportunity we have, Deputy Martin, an independent public inquiry here. The Taoiseach made this perfectly clear to Secretary of State Villiers when he met with her recently also. In regard to another thing that you mentioned there now, I took note of. Let me see, can I? Yeah. Okay, that's the Finucane inquiry and the issues that we discussed with Northern Ireland. Now, you mentioned the Parades Commission. We've had a number of issues about this. We support clearly the rule of law. The Taoiseach and myself have discussed the parades situation and the role of the Parades Commission on a number of occasions indeed with the British authorities. I'm aware that the Taoiseach raised this specifically with Secretary of State Villiers when they met on the 29th of April. Our view is that all parties should cooperate fully with the Parades Commission and to respect its determinations and its decisions. No one, you're quite right, no one wants to see a return to the kind of deplorable violence which has marred Northern Ireland's reputation in the past. And it's very important in the context of the upcoming marching season, Alasdair Cora, that the decisions of the Parades Commission are fully respected and that both the Parades Commission and the PSNI receive our full support, ensuring that the rule of law is upheld in this regard. Clearly, there were breaches of that before Christmas and after Christmas, and I'm glad that this matter has settled down, and I do hope that the Commission will have its determinations respected. You had, I think, 18 questions. What you said you had. The first one is about the Parades Commission. The next one is about the Finucane case. The third one is about bankers' bonuses. We've obviously discussed the CRD4 directive, which during Ireland's presidency limits the amount of bonuses that bankers can have, and there are bankers in Northern Ireland too. As I said to you, in respect of the forthcoming referendum, I didn't discuss that with the Prime Minister in terms of his view that there should be a referendum in Britain. In terms of what we discussed in general about the financial crisis, yes, I mentioned and discussed that with him. You've a second question about Pat Finucane. As I said, I didn't deal, Deputy Martin, with him in respect of the 3.8 billion loan. I responded to that. The Piece 4 dividend is to deal in part with the youth unemployment, but there's specifically a 6 billion fund in there which we discussed last week. I didn't discuss my bilateral arrangement with President Obama with the Prime Minister.